Dr. Geetanjali, Dr. Teja was enlightening us about the disinfection practices regarding the separate cubicle being made with the disinfectant spray. So can you just briefly tell us what are the disinfectants that are effective against COVID-19?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar, sir. Good morning to everyone. So before discussing about the disinfection, I'll just tell you what are the guidelines we are following in our institute. So for infection control practices, we are following MOHFW, NCDC and CDC WHO guidelines. And for diagnostic purposes, we are following ICMR guidelines. So why we should concentrate on disinfectants is because infection prevention control measures should be strict in every hospital to break the chain of this infection by properly following all infection control practices like proper hand hygiene, PPE, and transmission based precautions. All these precautions has to be followed. And we must have heard even in USA the National Poison Data System has mentioned that there are a few case reports about hospitalizations due to misuse of disinfectant. It is clearly improper use of disinfectants. So that's why we are stressing more about disinfection practices. I'll just focus one slide where I have taken this slide most common disinfectants we are using in India especially. So these are the disinfectants I have taken from CDC guidelines and also Environmental Protection Agency of USA. So sodium hypochlorite is the most common disinfectant we are using right now. And the concentrations according to WHO, it is 0.1% concentration for general disinfection and 1% sodium hypochlorite we can use for deep cleaning. And alcohol, it has to be around 70%. And quaternary ammonium compound mixed with isopropyl can be used for hand sanitizers. And hydrogen peroxide vapors also can be used. And if it is glutaraldehyde mixed, we can use for other purposes like fumigation if we require. Then peroxyacetic acid and hydrogen peroxide. And chlorhexidine dichlorogluconate can also be used. It has mentioned in WHO guidelines. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so what was the spray you are using in that cubicle that is made outside, and how do you prepare it? Because most of the times the spray is given in the hand of a housekeeping worker. So how do we instruct them and how do we ask them to prepare it?
Yes, sir. So not only the proper selection of the disinfectant, even the concentration and dilution and the stability of the disinfectant should also be focused by every healthcare personnel. I'll show you one slide.
So what is the component that you are using in the cubicle that is set up outside in the OPD?
Sir, actually, give me a second. The slide got stuck.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I got it now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So this is about the concentration of various disinfectants. So most commonly in India and also in our Anantapur, we are using sodium hypochlorite in both the forms, in liquid forms as well as powder forms. So here I have given 1% sodium hypochlorite solution preparation. So if the packet, the liquid sodium hypochlorite packet has 5% available chlorine, then we can mix one part of the liquid hypochlorite and 4 parts of water. Any water can be used. So here I have given one small example. So to prepare 1 liter solution, 200 ml of liquid bleach and 800 ml of water should be added. And this 1 liter sodium hypochlorite can be used. And it has to be prepared every day. Within 24 hours, that solution has to be used, and it has to be freshly prepared solution every day. And coming to the powder form, so powder form is cheap and it is available everywhere. So if the powder form contains 70% of available chlorine, then we can mix for 1 liter solution, we can mix 7 grams of powder form. So this powder form is mainly used for widespread spraying outside in environments, in ambulance pathways. In such pathways, we can use this. Thank you.
So, most of the times we get 5% solution, I believe. We get a Bacilloid 5% solution. Technically, that is a brand name we get under. So, do we make it to 0.1%?
Sorry, sir, I didn't get you. Bacillus.
So, you're technically going to make it to 0.1%. The
Yes.
solution of 5% hypochlorite, you are going to make it to 0.1%.
Yes, sir.
And how frequently do you need to clean the surfaces?
Sir, it is recommended daily twice in for all the hospital units. If it is a critical care unit, actually we are following every 4 hours, or else in isolation units like dialysis, laboratories and all. So every shift we can use that.
Okay, any role of the floor mats being soaked in hypochlorite and laid at the entrances of ICU or OPD?
Yes, it's better to use. Frequently we have to change, but so these floor mats can be soaked in sodium hypochlorite and place it in ICUs, or else after doping of PP, they can tap on the floor mats, then coming into the yellow zone. They can do in that way. So it is better to use floor mats in everywhere, mainly critical care units.
Yeah, and there is a lot of discussion about how long the aerosols spray on certain surfaces, I mean, stay on certain surfaces. So, is there any particular duration that can be explained, like on metal surfaces, these many hours and all?
Sir, it has been circulating in medias that plastic surface, it will be for 2 to 3 days. If it is stainless steel, 1 to 2 days, and hard surface is for 9 days, and it is linen that it is 3 to 4 days. But there is no proper guidelines on this.
Okay, and suppose we get a suspect patient and we use, say, bed linens and other things. So, any specific things that we need to do for the bed linen used for a suspect patient?
Better if we have a designated linen, that is one thing. And it is great if we use disposable linen for all the COVID patients, so that this disposable linen can be soaked in 5% Lysol or phenol and can dispose easily. If it is like common linen, then this linen should take transportation from segregation area to storage area. It has to taken in a trolley with a leak-proof container bag. It has to be packed into it and take from storage area to segregation area through a separate pathway, and it has to be stored in a designated place. And washing if this of this linen is with the 0.05% sodium hypochlorite.
And is there anything for the scrubs also, for the doctor's scrubs? Do we need to, can we use any solution, or will a Dettol or something like that do?
Yes, sir. Actually, according to WHO, if it is any scrub suit or else normal dresses, if we go into the COVID ICUs, so such dresses, according to WHO, we can soak it in a hot water along with the detergent and put it in a washing machine. But in few setups, if there is no washing machine, then they can use 0.05% sodium hypochlorite. They have to soak for 30 minutes. After that, it has to be dried in sunlight.
Okay, so sunlight has its role.
Definitely.
And what do you do? And I mean, do you have any separate color coding, like you have the biomedical waste separation, especially? You have color coding bins. So, do you have any separate color coding for keeping all the waste material, the biomedical waste?
No, sir. There is no separate coding for COVID samples. They have to follow the general rules of biomedical waste management. Only thing is, all the COVID patients' biomedical waste have to pack in a leak-proof bags according to the color coding, and it has to be labeled as a COVID, because the healthcare workers and treatment plan workers, while handling, They have to be with utmost care while handling this COVID. That's why it's better to label as a COVID.
The healthcare workers involved in taking the biomedical waste, I believe, should be in complete PPE.
Yes, sir. And the
Okay.
transportation pathway also have to be separate.
Okay. And I would like to know more about how do you fumigate the areas? Suppose a suspect patient walks into your ER, so and the patient goes out again. So do you have to fumigate the entire area, or what is the protocol for that?
Actually, this question is a debate question, sir. And a lot of people are experiencing these views regarding fumigation. I'll speak about India. WHO says we can implement any measures based on our national risk control strategy. And even in NIBH guidelines, it has mentioned about fumigation process. And if we take the Indian scenario, and in most of the hospitals, there is no periodic maintenance of AC filters, and also there is no proper air exchange efficacy maintenance. So there is a chance to get contaminated in ICUs, OTs with a lot of bacteria and airborne molds. So there is an increasing chance in nosocomial infections according to Indian scenario if we won't fumigate. So in our hospital, what we are doing is regular deep cleaning of all units, especially operation theaters and ICUs, regular deep cleaning with 1% sodium hypochlorite. And if fumigation is required, like when there is a very high bacterial load in the air, or else if there is an outbreak, then we are going with the fumigation. For fumigation, here we are using hydrogen peroxide vapors.
Yeah, and any specific things for something like commonly used equipment, say X-rays and ECGs, ECG missions, X-rays?
Yes, sir. Actually, if it has to be designated for COVID patients, any portable X-ray, portable ABG machine, ECG, defibrillator machines, everything has to be designated for COVID patients. If it is not designated, then according to if it is a metal thing, then it has to be cleaned with alcohol 70%. If it is fiber or plastic, we can use 1% sodium hypochlorite. I'll just show you a slide regarding CT scan machine disinfection. Um, just a second.
So I think Balakishore sir, whatever practice is going to be followed in the radiology suite is more or less the same practice, I believe, going to the cath lab. Dr. Balakishore.
Good morning.
So I believe
Yes,
the
sir.
practice is more or less going to be the same with regards to, say, a radiology suite and a cath lab suite.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Chandrasekhar, and good morning, panelists and all the viewers. Yes, Dr. Chandrasekhar, it is the same preparedness for cath lab also, as it is for the radiology part.
Okay. So, Dr. Geeta, if you are ready, can you just...
Sir,
yeah, you can just tell us. It's not a...
Okay, thank you, sir.
So most of the surfaces that we encounter are metal and fiber surfaces. So most probably, will our regular disinfectants be helpful?
Yes, sir. Actually, if it is, sorry, so I didn't get that slide. So for any X-ray, CT scan, MRI scan, all this comes under non-critical items according to Spalding classification, which means that it will come in contact with the intact skin. So we can just go with the disinfection and deep cleaning. So if it is like CT is necessary for any patient, if it is definitely we have to take CT or angiography, then the radiology diagnostic suite and angiographic suite both minimum air changes should be maintained at 15 air changes per hour, and deep cleaning should be done with the 1% sodium hypochlorite, and all the equipments can be cleaned with the 70% of alcohol. But while cleaning, we should use the long handled sponges, so that it will be like inside and all they can clean easily. And one more thing is the cleaning person should use full PPE, and also the whole healthcare personnel and the patient also should be covered with the mask. They should take utmost precautions for this. And if they want to do fumigation for a portable X-ray machine or else CT scan, they can use hydrogen peroxide vapor or else ultraviolet germicidal irradiation they can use. And for X-ray portable machine, the detector can be covered with two bags, inner bag and outer bag. So each bag, while removing the detector, each bag has to be disinfected twice with the 1% sodium hypochlorite. And all this CT room and angiography room will take 1 to 3 hours time for total disinfection, because it depends on the patient, whether the patient is on ventilator or not on ventilator. If the patient is on ventilator, the air changes per hour will take about 180 minutes. So we have to wait 180 minutes before doing the deep cleaning. If the patient is not on ventilator, the air changes per hour will take 46 minutes. So we have to wait 46 minutes before doing disinfection. So the overall time will take around 1 to 3 hours.
So, very elaborately taken questions on disinfection practices. Thank you, Dr. Geetanjali. So, Balakishore sir, would you like to add anything with regards to your cleaning protocol, especially for cath lab? Are we regularly following any separate cleaning protocol apart from what Dr. Geetanjali has taken? Sir, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, Dr. Chandrasekhar, we regularly follow the standard CDC recommendations for preparing the cath lab for COVID patients. Also, whenever we need to do an angioplasty in these patients with COVID-19 infections, as elaborated by Dr. Geetanjali, it is moreover the same, nothing much different. The standard protocols need to be followed, and the healthcare personnel should be well equipped with the personal protection equipment, and as well continue with disinfection. Moreover, the suit should be negative pressure, should be maintained regularly. These standard protocols are the same for the cath lab preparedness for handling patients with COVID-19 for angiography and angioplasty. It's the same.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, probably our next discussion should be on preparation of our healthcare workers. So, Dr. Ravi, how do you form an ideal COVID team? Do we have to form a COVID team for the hospital? Is it an integral part of the fight against COVID?
Yes, Dr. Chandrasekhar. As a part of preparedness, as per WHO protocol, the preparedness program starts with a functional and active COVID preparedness team, first of all. So, who has to define your SOP, how to prepare? A COVID core team should be defined. There should be a core clinical team. There should be a COVID task force team. So, the COVID task force team is going to take care of the SOPs, like how to do, when to do, who has to do. So all these things should be, all these things are taken care by COVID task team. So the task force should contain one management person, a clinician who is going to lead the clinical team, then a microbiologist ideally, and other stakeholders of the hospital, so that they can plan their financials, then their backups, their store capacities, etc. Apart from this, the core clinical team should have a dispensary approach, like intensivist and a pulmonologist, a senior physician, and a clinical microbiologist would give you a very good clinical team for the COVID. If not, you can maybe a non-COVID hospital. See, now all the discussion is about how to face this COVID-19 for a non-COVID hospital. Say, I'm running a clinic, and how should I get myself saved out of this COVID? So maybe you can have, if it is a single man or two man, maybe you can hire your SOPs from other non-COVID hospitals and implement the same here. So the utmost important is your OPD. So if you want to have establish a clinical team for COVID, definitely, as I have told, all those panel members should be there. And at least now you have many more, specialty and super specialty consultants online. So now even IMA and Government of India has approved online consultation as good as physical consultation. So there is a GIVO also. So you can have an online consultation for specialists so that you can avoid a lot of physical contact with patients. So that's how you should plan. Like you should have a frontline warriors who directly comes into contact with the patient, and in second line you need to have all the specialists who can physically jump into the situation, like physician, anesthetist, your intensivist if you have, and a pulmonologist who can jump into the situation and clear the gowns. And in third line you need to have a super specialist like nephrologist, neurology, cardiology, all these people who can be a panel member who can advise you regarding that, regarding the patient care, and if you have any complications, if patient lands up in multi-organ failure, you can take an online consultation, or EICU is a good concept where if patients are in ICU, you can connect with some good electronic ICU care facilities who can provide you good ICU care. That's it. And regarding PPEs, if you want, I can in regarding preparedness, apart from forming a team, your training sessions are going to play a major role. Your training include training of doctors, training of sisters, training of class 4 workers. The last one is most important. You have to train your healthcare workers, these class 4 employees, to the core. You need to concentrate on a very high note on that, because most of the doctors will be, most of the time they'll be careful. Sisters is definitely monitored by doctors, they'll be very careful. And most of the time,
session aitem
doctor, please. After this, class 4 employees who are not monitored by either doctors nor sisters, and that is the weak link in the system, where if you are treating a COVID patient, you have to be very careful with class 4 employees. So your training session should concentrate more on class 4 employees. You train the doctors first, then each doctor should train at least 10 sisters, and you have to train in such a way that each sister should be able to train 10 class 4 employees. So that's how you need to prepare your spread of this training should be faster than spread of virus. Then only you can serve. If you are not prepared from your hospital side how to handle COVID patient, then you have it. So the spread of virus, we have to go forward and do your training sessions more rapidly than spread of the virus. I can just share a slide regarding the PPE protocols, like what kind of worker should wear, which level of care is required for which healthcare worker. Maybe a person who is not treating a COVID patient can have a minimum PPE where they can have I think it is very clear in the picture. You can see the healthcare worker who is not treating a COVID patient, that is grade 1. A normal patient who just came to your hospital can be treated with your mask, cap and full coat and glove. Maybe a shoe cover would suffice. But when you are treating a COVID patient, definitely the addition would be your goggles, then your overcoat, that is water repellent overcoat should be there when you are going into the patient care area, and the shoe cover should be there, disposable shoe cover should be there, and eye protective. So we all know that virus is going to enter into your because of your 3 areas, that is your eyes, nose and throat. So at any cost, your eyes, nose and throat should not be in a direct contact even with the air of a patient care area of COVID patients. say you are working in ICU, so your eyes, nose, and throat should not be exposed to even the air of that ICU. So that is the whole idea of having all the PPEs. There is no big deal with that. You make sure that your conjunctiva or your nasal mucosa, oral mucosa is not exposed. And if somebody who is having ulcers or some kind of breach in the mucosa are likely to have high exposure rates. And maybe I just wanted to give a point here. Lot of healthcare facilities and municipal authorities are using this hypochlorite spray, and the results are pretty bad. Actually, there are more evidence coming down now saying that sprinkling hypochlorite solution is causing more mucosal damage. There will be mucosal irritation, which is leading to mucosal damage, and the mucosal barrier will be broken because that contains all the chlorine and all. You know how the bleach works, right? So most of us, must have experienced how the bleach will act. So once this comes into contact of your mucosal areas, there will be definitely a breach, and that is going to cause you, cause you more susceptible to this virus also. So be careful when you are going into the, cleaning procedure of this, sprinklers of hypochlorite solution. Better you cover your mucosa, like your eyes, nose, and throat. You have to cover and make sure that you don't, expose your mucosa to, as if like the new a viral video is roaming around. Is now Trump wants to send some detergent into the body and clean the virus. So don't do that. So that's kind of stupidity that we can say in this kind of pandemic season. If you go on with your own self-made, treatments and all, it's going to cost you a lot. So please, my point here is don't expose your eyes, nose, and throat mucosa directly to any harming agents like hypochlorite solution. And even in emergency, I heard people are coming with cleaning their mouth with Dettol. We regularly get calls from our non-medical friends saying that whether I can use Dettol instead of toothpaste. Please don't do all those things. Whatever is prescribed, everywhere it is available. Please do follow whatever is given. So I think educating the society is also a very important role for all the doctors who are working in peripheries. And next, coming to the grade 3 one, this is like a full suit where when you are entering into the COVID unit, the additional will be, apart from this water repellent gown, there will be a full suit, which from head to toe, there will be a full suit and a hood will be added. So this will be only for the patients. If you are caring a patient who are, if you are involving in procedures where there is a high aerosol exposure, like intubations, like anesthetists when they are going for intubation, and putting a Ryle's tube. If you are in operation theater and if you are getting exposed for blood and body fluids, and you might have to intubate a patient or something like that, definitely this kind of full suit is recommended for those who are working in a high aerosol procedure areas, right? So then maybe you can design your hospital like this. You can divide your hospital. There is something called screening area, triage areas, OPDs, ID wards, and all. So you can have this kind of chart. Which area should be given which kind of PPE, and which area, so that this is like containing your own hospital. You are creating zones in your own hospital so that infection won't spread into one area to another area. There are some red zones like your emergency department. There are some emergency department, ICUs, operation theaters, and there are some green zones like admin cabins and stores, purchase, all those things. So those areas doesn't require your full suit PPEs. So those areas you need to restrict people entry from entering into green zones to another zones. It's all about your own preparedness. Nobody is going to give you a full structure for your own hospital. You need to know what you are supposed to do. Then you do it for your hospital. You do it for yourself. Do it yourself. That's a bottom line here. Nobody is going to come and save you. It's you who are going to save your own hospital and your own people. Right? That's it.
Yeah, before going to the next question, I would like to say that we have got received lot of requests for communication in Telugu also. So definitely what I would like to say is once we finish this session, probably we are going to give the entire gist in Telugu again. So probably all our speakers are well versed in Telugu. So once we finish this session, probably at the end for 20-25 minutes, I will repeat the same questions again, probably in Telugu, and we'll try to gist up the whole thing that we have done. Because a lot of general public also have logged in, which is a good thing. So definitely we'll do it further. So definitely Telugulo kuda maatladtamandi. At the end of the session, 20 minutes, we are going to spare కంప్లీట్ గా ఏదైతే మేము చెప్పామో అదే 20 minutes ఖచ్చితంగా మళ్ళీ తెలుగులో దాని అంతా సమ్మరీ ఇస్తాం. సో బిఫోర్ ఇదంతా కంప్లీట్ అయిపోయిన తర్వాత డెఫినెట్లీ విల్ గెట్ బ్యాక్. సో డాక్టర్ తేజ, సో వాట్ ఈస్ యువర్ చాలా మంది we give HCQ prophylaxis to healthcare workers. So what is your take on that? Is it necessary to be given to all the healthcare workers, or are there any specific category like treating doctors or anybody?
Yes, Chandrasekhar. I'm sure that most of the people చాలా మంది ఈ క్వశ్చన్ కోసం వెయిట్ చేస్తూ ఉంటారు. So what is the use of HCQ in the prophylaxis of COVID-19 at this moment? Yeah, definitely. I'll give a brief introduction about the pathophysiology of the COVID. See, the COVID-19 అనేది it usually enters into the human cell through a receptor called as ACE, angiotensin convertase enzyme receptor. So usually it enters through the receptor into the human cells and that అక్కడ నుంచి కొద్దిగా proliferate అవుతుంది. So these in vitro studies are only there are in vitro studies, Chandrasekhar. So in vitro studies show that this HCQ and chloroquine usually bind to the ACE2 receptor and also stop the glycosylation process in the receptor. That's why the cells become refractory to the COVID disease. ఇప్పుడు HCQs right now in India, ICMR has given some guidelines. ICMR has given guidelines for the prophylaxis of the HCQs. So chloroquine is the most easily available anti-malarial drug. But when we come to the safety profile and also the the viral shedding, hydroxychloroquine is much better when compared to the chloroquine. Even the safety profile is good. So most of the people are now talking about the QT prolongation, all those things. Prophylaxis is the main demand nowadays in the whole world. So to get to know how to get away from this COVID-19 disease, there are two interventions that is non-pharmacological which we are doing now. That is the home quarantine, so quarantining ourselves, social distancing, and closing of all the workplaces like schools, temples or mosque, everything that should be looked after by the government itself. And coming to the pharmacological interventions, definitely three things are happening now. That is antiviral agents, hydroxychloroquine, and the vaccination. Right now, there is no recommendation of any antiviral for prophylaxis of COVID-19. Coming to the HCQs, chloroquine, as I said, it's an easily affordable and easily available anti-malarial agent. But since for better safety profile, we use HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, and ICMR has recently given a recommendation for the use of HCQ. As per ICMR, all healthcare workers, those involved in the treatment of suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 should take prophylaxis with hydroxychloroquine. So initially it is given as 400 mg twice in the first day, followed by 400 mg once weekly for the next 7 weeks, and it should be taken along with the meals. And it also given us the asymptomatic household contacts of the laboratory confirmed cases should also take the HCQ prophylaxis, same as that of healthcare workers, but only it is for next 3 weeks.
Yeah,
And-
Dr. Balkishore. So in case I want to take HCQ, do I need to get my ECG done? Is it a mandatory that I need to get my ECG done before taking HCQ?
As Dr. Chandrasekhar, HCQ is useful in the management of critically ill patients with COVID-19 infections. So this we have borrowed the information from the West, from the various countries where the global pandemic is going on. So how to monitor the safety of HCQ therapy in patients with COVID infections? So as we all know, HCQs are one of the safest drugs because we have been using HCQs for rheumatology purposes for the last 3 decades, and it has shown that it is a relatively safe drug. But in the pandemic of COVID-19, we should be extra cautious. The reason is that the COVID-19 pandemic has also simultaneous cardiovascular manifestations. So myocarditis is also a common complication in COVID-19 patients, wherein we simultaneously use HCQs. So whenever you want to start a particular patient on HCQs, immediately after 24 hours after starting HCQ treatment, you take a ECG. So take an ECG the moment you start, and after 24 hours also you take the second ECG. You monitor the QT interval, that is the corrector QT interval. The corrector QT interval is given by the Bayes formula, as we all know. So you monitor the corrector QT interval. So if there is an increase in the QT prolongation, 60 milliseconds after the first 24 hours, that means these patients are potential patients to develop a prolongation of the QT interval and subsequent arrhythmic complications of the QT prolongation syndrome. The other thing is when it doesn't happen, so that means the first ECG and second ECG does not show a significant prolongation of the QT interval, then you calculate the corrected QT interval 24 hours after the HCQ therapy. So we usually divide these people into 3 risk groups, that is the low risk group, the intermediate risk group, and the high risk group. So if the corrected QT interval is less than 470 milliseconds, they come under the low risk group. If it is between 470 to 500 milliseconds, they come in the intermediate risk group. And if it is more than 500 milliseconds, these patients are categorized as the high risk groups. So the entire attention, focus, and concentration in monitoring the corrected QT interval is in the high risk group. So whenever the patient is having a QT interval prolongation of more than 500 milliseconds, you should do a telemetric ECG monitoring, because we cannot take ECGs frequently because we have to avoid the healthcare personnel getting infected. So a telemetric ECG monitoring is suggested, and you keep analyzing the ECGs for the corrected QT interval. Suppose if the corrected QT interval is more than 500 and frequent VPCs are coming, or if you see any non-sustained VT episodes, then these are the patients who are more likely to die of QT prolongation rather than the disease per se itself. So you can withdraw HCQs whenever you document a non-sustained VT episode in COVID-19 patients once you have started them on HCQs. The other group, the intermediate risk group and the low risk group patients, you need not withdraw the HCQ therapy.
So in a bullet answer, if somebody is less than 40 years and they don't have any comorbidities, so do they need to get a ECG done before taking it as a prophylaxis?
Routine ECG monitoring is not recommended in patients with COVID-19 infections. So the ECG monitoring is recommended in patients with critically ill patients. Most of the patients with COVID-19, 80% of the times they are asymptomatic, and routine ECG monitoring is not needed. It's not recommended.
Okay, so prophylactically, I don't need to check my check my ECG before taking a HCQ prophylaxis.
Yes, if as said before, if the patients are in the low risk group, that is the corrected QT is less than 470, you don't need to take an ECG. The caution is only when they lie in the intermediate risk group and the high risk group.
Dr. Teja, do you find any other multivitamins being given to your healthcare workers? Like, do you suggest them taking any supplements like vitamin D3 or zinc or any other supplements to improve their immunity?
Yeah, Chandrasekhar, I know many people are asking about this vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, these are supplements. But all the studies which have been done, there's zinc or supplements, everything is done with the acute respiratory viral illnesses, not per se to the SARS-CoV-19 infection. So definitely they are useful for treating of any pulmonary pathology. If at all they can be they can have quicker recovery rate. But for COVID-19, there is no such recommendation to use all the multivitamins, vitamin C or vitamin D. There are studies which show that there will be beneficial with these multivitamins only with the acute respiratory other virus illnesses. There are no studies for SARS-CoV right.
Dr. Mukund, there is a lot of talk regarding the use of steam inhalation or salt water gargling. So does it really kill the virus, or are they only steps to improve our respiratory tract?
Obviously, good morning everyone, good morning panelists, and good morning all viewers. Yeah. Obviously, there will be some advantages of taking steam inhalation or steam inhalation. It will prevent a bit of spreading infection.
Okay. Yesterday I have gone through one paper which shows steam inhalation has been of some advantage in some patients. Probably the category of people they are looking at was patients rather than the general public. So as Dr. Ravi already gave us some idea about the PPEs, so there is a lot of discussion regarding the mask. So is there, as I have seen, what is the reuse policy for masks and what are the uses of each mask? As I can see, there are technically, to tell all of you, there are 4 different types of masks that we are using now. One is the surgical mask. Then the next 3 are FFP1, FFP2 and FFP3. So each one is based on, it is all based on European Union has given this names FFP1, FFP2 and FFP3. And FFP2 is equivalent to N95 of the US standards. So N95 is basically of the US designation, and FFP2 is of the UK designation. So what it does is the mask, basically, to just tell you the classification, FFP1 basically filters up to 80% of the virus, and it has a leak of around 22%. So most of the FFP1 masks tend to be a little cheaper than the N95. Then the category of masks that we are getting are N95 for hospital use. So they are up to 95% filtering capacity for the virus and air leak of around 7%. So FFP3 technically is not available. So FFP1 and FFP2. I think the commercially available model as of now of 3M is 8210. So that is the commercially available N95 model. Yeah, Dr. Geetanjali, what is the reuse policy?
Actually, among PPEs, there is a lot of shortage of supplies everywhere, not only in India, even UK, USA, even other countries also, they are facing supplies shortage. So many of the researchers are thinking about the many alternative ways for this, for reuse. So I got, in this crisis, definitely we should consider the reuse policy. So I got CDC guidelines. I'll share you one slide. So according to CDC, these are the various methods we can use for N95 masks. So for N95 masks and what Chandu sir said, FFP1, FFP2. So for all this masks, we can use these methods. So this is according to CDC, the vaporous hydrogen peroxide, ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, microwave generated steam, moist heat incubation. So this is a clearly depicted picture. In this sunlight, there is no evidence, but we all know that the sunlight kills any organism within 2 to 4 hours, but there is no proven evidence. And hot air oven also, there is no evidence. So best thing in our hospitals, in all of our hospitals, best thing is autoclave. So moist heat incubation we can do, but make sure that temperature and humidity should be correct. So temperature is 60 degrees Celsius and humidity is 80%. So with this autoclave, we can reuse the N95 masks. After 3 cycles, we should discard. So only for 3 cycles, this autoclave is effective. And I have read one US journal also. In that it has mentioned even at home we can use micro oven by keeping the temperature at 160 Fahrenheit, and for humidity maintenance we can keep some water inside. So this is the what in US journal it has mentioned. And when it comes to ethylene oxide, so it is not recommended, because if we are using ethylene oxide for N95 mask disinfection, so the air exchange time will take in ETO. So the ETO may remain in N95 mask. So chronic inhalation of this toxic product may cause neurological disinfection. That's why ETO is not recommended now. And one more effective and most promising method is hydrogen peroxide vapor. So this vapor we can use for 20 cycles. And one more is microwave, that is effective for 20 cycles. And UV irradiation, even in Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute of Kerala, they are using this UV radiation germicidal. So even this one can be used. So when it comes to face masks or else face shields or else goggles, so these we can clean it with alcohol wipes or else hydrochloride solution, or else a clean neutral detergent solution we can use. So the goggles and face shield at both the inner side and outer side should be cleaned properly. After drying, we can use it. So this is the reuse policies.
Okay.